Hello there, it's Steve here. We're going to have a crack at our first video lecture. We're looking at topic 1, understanding childhood and child protection. And in this little video, we're going to be kind of unpacking, which is a very popular word in lectures, unpacking concepts of childhood, youth, young people, children, all that kind of stuff, and seeing how those conceptions influence our understanding of child protection and our practices of child protection for that matter. Okay, so that's what we're going to do here. So what I'd recommend that you do before you go any further is you get a copy of the written learning guide in front of you. So on a computer screen it'd be good because there are links. Sometimes you can pause me and then go and follow some links if you want to. A written version is good for other reasons, but of course you can't access the links I've tried, and you press your finger against the paper and it just doesn't do it. Alright, so I'm going to just pause myself for a minute and then you can go and do that if you haven't done that already. So here I am paused. Alright, hopefully you paused me and now we're back. Okay, so the first thing we do, and you've got your learning guide in front of you so you know that, and you've done a million learning guides before so you know it from that as well, is we have a look at this, the big fat grey box that sits and lurks, waiting at the beginning of every learning guide topic. So this is the big fat grey box that says, here are some frameworky things that we're going to be looking at in this topic. So for this one, we've got in the U section, we've got going to be looking at reflections of your own, definitions of childhood and youth, reflections on what is the basis for valuing children and young people, what is the basis for thinking that they're worth protecting and nurturing and looking after. So you get to think about that for yourself. As part of that, in the theory section, we're going to be having a look at definitions of childhood and youth, and the idea that these are kind of constructed things that are fluid and not set in stone anywhere. We're going to have a look at something called child-focused approaches, which, while it's a new term, conceptually something you'll be familiar with, thinking back to core youth work values around young person as the primary client. So more on that a bit later. In the practice section, going to be having a look at, again, child-focused approaches. I guess we're hoping this is an opportunity for you to think about, well, how do I apply that? You know, how do I do child-focused approaches in my own youth work? There is an opportunity to have a look at, or to think in a child-focused kind of way in a case study later on. But again, you really need the written stuff for that one. We're just going to refer to it here in the video lecture. And finally, context. The main thing contextually we're doing in this particular topic is having a look at the historical context of the understanding of childhood and children, etc., and how that's related to the historical journey of child protection. Okay, so there you go, frameworky things all there for you to enjoy. Okay, but let's start definitions of child and childhood. I've decided just to start with a nice, safe Wikipedia kind of definition here on child, so we'll just have a quick read through of that. Wikipedia says about child, generally a human between the stages of birth and puberty. Some vernacular definitions of a child include the fetus as being an unborn child. The legal definition of child generally refers to a minor, otherwise known as a person younger than the age of majority. Child, which may also describe a relationship with a parent or an authority figure. Okay, so just hold that definition in your head there. We also asked Wikipedia, what do you think about the term childhood? And Wikipedia very politely said to us, the term childhood is non-specific and can imply a varying range of years in human development. Developmentally, it refers to the period between infancy and adulthood. In common terms, childhood is considered to start from birth. Some consider that childhood is a concept of play and innocence, ends at adolescence. In many countries, there is an age of majority when childhood officially ends and a person legally becomes an adult. The age ranges anywhere from 13 to 21, with 18 being the most common. So, a few things you want you to get from just having a quick look at those two definitions. And mainly is the idea, again, that we covered way back in cluster one when we looked at definitions of youth. And it's these things are kind of socially constructed terms. And by that we mean they're not set in stone anywhere, they're kind of different from time to time and different from place to place. They'll be different maybe in your own mind, and they'll be different within the society that you live in. So there's all kinds of differences that we need to kind of understand, and that how we understand these concepts will influence our approach to to child protection. All right, so that's the important stuff. It's important to realise that not everybody thinks the same thing about this kind of stuff, and how you think about it influences how you do other things. That's really, in a lot of ways, what frameworks are all about. Understanding the relationship between what you believe and how you think influences what you do and how you practice it, when you're out there in the field. So, important kind of stuff. Now, but saying something socially constructed doesn't mean that it's not based on something real. So just because someone said something about developmental stages in those definitions, you'll see things about ages and developmental stages. It seems pretty clear that when you look at an infant, it's doing something different to what a toddler is doing, that it's doing something different to what a child does and different to what a teenager does. That there are different things that you can see going on, or that people have seen going on, but then they've created some kind of description of that, some kind of framework to describe that. And while those frameworks can be different, whether you're a Piaget or an Erikson, you'll describe these things slightly differently, but they're ways of describing something that's kind of real. So it's not that social construction means it's completely made up and not based on anything, but the idea is that there may be something real that people are observing, but that observation will be filtered through some kind of different interpretive lens culturally or whatever. So one of the things that we've written in the learning guide here is this. I'll just read this. Whereas biology makes all childhoods in some way similar, the culture, customs and laws of each society make childhoods very different from each other in different places and across different times. So that's a kind of good, succinct statement there about what we're trying to really get across in relation to these concepts versus what might be a reality. So what we want to do is talk a little bit about the Western view and the Western development, I guess, historical development of these concepts of child and youth and those kind of things, and maybe how that relates to the historical journey around what is child protection, what was it, what is it now, that kind of thing. So just historically, I guess, from a Western perspective, if we go back to, say, the 17th century, some historians kind of say that there was a very differently developed concept of childhood, which might be described as children as little adults. So they weren't seen to be the immature, kind of vulnerable little creatures that often seen today. They weren't necessarily seen as those little creatures that might need extra nurture and protection and developing and looking after and that kind of things. Now, some other historians say, no, that's nonsense, But anyway, so I wasn't there, I can't really tell you. But it's interesting to know that there is this idea that the notion of childhood developed. And when we get up to the last century, which sounds like a long time ago, but it wasn't that long ago, the 20th century, some people thought it was going to be and was the century of the child. And you certainly see an increased acknowledgement of the importance of children in the future of societies, an increased interest in health, welfare and education of children, growing movements towards the end of the century about children's rights that turned into kind of legally enforceable documents around those kind of things. So we certainly see over the last few centuries the development of a notion of a childhood, and then correspondingly the development of ideas around child protection. So this kind of concept that's evolved is the idea that childhood is some kind of mixture of happiness, wonder, innocence, play, learning and all that kind of stuff. It's a very almost idealised kind of view, and that the more you grow older, the more you lose that innocence, the more you lose that sense of awe and wonder, the less you can play and the more you've got to work and the harder life becomes. That kind of thing. You can see a little picture here on our slide, of the little cheruby child with the little snake coming out. It's kind of this awareness that life isn't all as it should be. But the idea that childhood is something that's worth protecting and that children are something worth protecting and this whole innocence is worth protecting, and that the exposure of young people to these more adult, harsher things about the world is something we've got to kind of leave and give them an arm's length and protect them from. So the notion is the child is the kind of vulnerable, not quite developed, not fully responsible for their own whatever, is closely linked with the idea that they need nurture and protection from the harsher realities of life. We see from the 1960s onwards a strong development of, I guess, the child protection movement. in the 1960s, an American pediatrician by the name of C. Henry Kemp published The Battered Child Syndrome, which is probably considered to be the first kind of real serious modern work on what has become the child protection movement. Through the 70s, we see doctors becoming mandatory notifiers of child abuse and harm. In the 80s, we see the International Year of the Child with Care for Kids. Find a minute to care for kids. That's all I'm going to sing for you, because that's probably all you really need to suffer, really. You're probably suffering enough out there. But if you want the full version of that, you can Google it. And of course, corresponding to all of that, I guess, is increased awareness of the importance of children, the rights of children, the need for the health and well-being of children to be looked after. So increased media attention around things of child protection, abuse, and harm. In the 1990s, we see the development of the United Nations Convention of the Rights of the Child, which is something that Australia ratifies. And in ratifying that, it means that the country has to kind of develop laws and institutions around child protection and looking after children's rights. It becomes accountable to the international community for those kind of things. So there's kind of serious stuff. So we're certainly in very much a child, protection, child rights kind of culture these days, and it has developed in response to, I guess, changing notions of what it means, to be a child, and what childhood means, what youth means, what being a young person kind of means. Okay, so let's just leave that there for a second. One other thing I just wanted to say is that from time to time you'll get a report or something come out that talks about how are our young people going, and you'll get that in a whole range of different areas. And there are three reports I generally like to look at. One is the Australian Institute of Health and Welfare. They have a regular report on the health and well-being of young people. Mission Australia has their kind of survey of young Australians, where they actually ask young people directly, what's on your mind, what's kind of worrying you, that kind of thing. And then ARACI, which is I just have to get them right, the Australian Research Alliance for Children and Youth, put on an annual report card on how children and young people are going across 8 kind of different areas. So I like to read these kind of reports to get a bit of an idea, particularly for this course, how young people are going in all kinds of areas. And you see a summary of some of those things up there. I didn't put everything up there because there was quite a lot. But generally the idea is that young people are kind of doing well in our society, although there are some concerns around certain health and mental health kind of areas. That has some implications for us in this cluster as we think about incidents of suicide and self-harm, so some of the mental health issues around that. There is an increased kind of reporting and substantiated cases of abuse, harm and risks of harm amongst children and young people. Groups like Indigenous young people, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander children and young people are overrepresented in child protection statistics or basically every social indicator, whether you're going well or not going well. Unfortunately, Indigenous children and young people are overrepresented in all those areas badly. In the Mission Australia report, 27.8, yes, that's 27.8, of the young people who were researched indicate that family conflict was a major concern to them. It was the second top issue of concern to them. So we can kind of see even across those reports, even this idea that generally young people and children are doing kind of well in Australian society. When it comes to issues to do with family and healthy families and healthy kind of children in terms of mental health and self-harm and suicide and child protection and harm and risk, there are some things that are worth kind of being concerned about and being aware of. And interestingly, across all the reports, one of the things that comes through time and time again is that, and wait for this will really surprise you, the quality of family life is totally linked to the quality of the well-being of children and young people. No, yes, can you believe that? That is actually a truth. So something that we all know and all suspected, is that good family life contributes to quality of life for children and young people. So this is good for us because it helps us to appreciate the work that we do, that kind of pastoral care, that kind of, if you think about spectrum, the kind of mental healthy spectrum, but apply it to child protection, that promotion and preventative kind of side of things that we do really, really well as chaplains and youth workers is important stuff. That when we're promoting, the well-being of parents or the well-being of families or skills for young people to cope in their families or in their lives, and when we create chances for people to connect together or to have adult mentors or people support children, young people, all those things that we do to promote strong families and strong lives in kids. It helps, it actually is part of the whole child protection intervention thing. So good for you, all you people out there. What you do makes a difference that really, really matters. So that's really important stuff to be aware of. Okay, now in the learning guide, there's one of these little thingies, a little reflection activity. So you can feel free to have a crack at that. If you'd like to, it's just an opportunity to kind of stop and just think about this whole thing about, before I got onto the welfare of kids in general in Australia, the values, the changing values, why we value children, and how it relates to child protection. So have a proper read of that and give that a go. Also, if you're interested, there's an optional side step where you can check out 3 sites that just about looking after kids. So there's some good stuff there. You'll probably find some things on there that could be some good resources that you could put children, young people, or families, parents onto. So they're worth having a look at, but you might want to do that later on. Okay, now the last thing I want to talk about for this learning guide topic is the idea in the area of child-focused practice or child-centred practice. So you can see there, child-focused practices or approaches are about promoting the rights of a child or young person to make choices, to form relationships, to communicate in safe ways, to allow them the freedom to think, experience, explore, question and search for answers on issues that impact upon their own well-being. So it's about empowering children and young people to being able to participate meaningfully in decisions that impact upon them. So again, as I said earlier, going back to cluster 1, and we looked at core youth work values, and that core youth work value was primary client. That youth workers consider children and young people to be the primary client. It's about empowerment, that other key kind of value. It's about actually ensuring that young people are making good, informed decisions, they have all that they need, that they're being involved, they're being informed, they're being considered, they're being heard, they're being understood, all that kind of stuff. So in a sense, child-focused approach or child-centered practice might be a new term for you, but you should understand the key ideas that are behind that. If you want an example of some good child-focused practice material, this side step in the learning guide encourages you to go and have a look here. Kids Skills, so Kids Skills developed by Ben Furman, very, very popular, well-regarded kind of program. For a bit of an idea of some of the ways that this particular fellow and group works, it's a good one to check out. But I really wanted to spend the last few minutes on focusing on is this idea of 4 main themes of child-focused approaches as they apply to child protection. And I'm going to read it from the learning guide because I've summarised it up here and I don't want to miss some of the extra important points that are there. Okay, so I'm going to read the 4. So the first one, recognising that there are critical time frames in the lives of children and adolescents and that it's important to address issues of harm and risk of harm early in a child's life and early in the life of the problem. Okay, so that's an important theme. The second one, developmental needs of children and young people should always be considered in the planning of intervention strategies. The third, children and young people should be provided with appropriate opportunities to participate in all aspects of child protection interventions that affect them. And promoting a collaborative approach to child protection, particularly strengthening the networks around a child that contribute to their well-being. So I guess if you have a child-focused approach and you're dealing with young people in terms of a child protection kind of issue, for many of us we kind of feel that sometimes the child protection processes are quite restrictive and maybe necessarily so, and can be quite disempowering because oftentimes it feels like it's taking choices and decisions away from the child or young person. So it's a difficult kind of balance to kind of make when you're a youth worker. So I guess if you're a youth worker working from a child-focused approach in child protection, I guess we really need to be thinking about having really good, clear understandings of childhood and adolescence and youth, what it means for welfare and well-being of children and young people. I think we need to be trying to take a perspective of a young person. Things we need to be creating opportunities to listen to the young person, to what they want. We need to be making sure young people understand what's going on, the consequences of different decisions and different actions, giving them clear information all the way along. I think really key idea, I guess, that comes out in those 4 principles is the idea as well is that we're not working with just the child, even though we're saying young person, child, primary client, that we actually understand which is another core value we looked at, the idea of the ecological idea, the idea that we are dealing with a young person in the context of a different system. So their family is really, really important, particularly when we need to be thinking about our role as youth worker in strengthening families and relationships between kids and their parents, but also the relationship outside of the family as well, between kids and other adults. They can look after them in groups of positive young people that can help support them, all that kind of stuff, that kind of, we know, are protective factors. So a child-focused approach takes all those things into consideration. Now I just want to read another little section because, again, there's some stuff written here that's just worth making sure we get it right. And it's kind of this idea that we'll kind of finish on. So this is what I want to read. As we explore what child abuse, harm and child protection are, keep in mind that one of the principles of a child-focused approach to the protection of children is to give children and young people opportunities to participate in decisions regarding their safety. This is an important right for many children living in vulnerable circumstances, and one which adults often struggle to respect in young people, particularly when their choice is to remain in a less than ideal situation and face an even more uncertain alternative. In the area of child protection, child-focused approaches make us aware of two perspectives on child rights that bump up against each other a little, or at the very least engage with each other in a robust way. One approach focuses on the child's voice, that is, what the child needs in order to make a good informed choice about their own safety, while the other approach focuses on the child's best interests, that is, what the child needs to have in place to live their lives to secure their safety. As we see in topics to come, legal and organisational policies that require youth workers to report any suspicion and disclosures of harm seem to flow more out of an understanding of children and their rights that focus on their best interests rather than their voice. These policies err on the side of caution, but there is a danger in offering such one-size-fits-all approaches to child protection. It is important for youth workers to work within their legal and organisational boundaries, but at the same time to ensure that within these processes the voice of the child or young person is heard, and that their unique views, experiences and circumstances are kept right back at the centre. If you think all the way back to Cluster 1, one of the unique characteristics and central values of youth work that we discussed was that in youth work the young person is always the primary client. This means that in any process involving a young person, especially when there are other people, views and agendas to consider, the role of the youth worker is to be there for them. It is vital to consider the needs of parents and other family members, school staff and other interested party, but when it comes down to it, among all the competing voices and interests, the youth worker needs to focus in on the voice and best interest of the young person. And this is particularly important in this difficult and dicey area of child protection. And so I guess that's where we kind of want to end up at this point, is to kind of say that, sure, this child-focused approaches really fit with what we're talking about in this youth work course, about looking after the interests and hearing the voice of children and young people, even in difficult processes and kind of regulatory and legal and kind of mandatory organisational processes of child protection that can seem a little bit restrictive and a little bit disempowering, that somehow we need to, as youth workers, to be continuing to work in child-focused ways within that system to be able to ensure that young people's rights are being held and they're being empowered as much as possible within those situations. Difficult, but hopefully as we go along we'll be able to continue to work out ways of being able to do that better and better. Okay, well, we'll leave that for the moment and I'll let you get on with all your fun assessment-y stuff you have to do next. Okay, bye for now.